Aloha everyone. This is the second installment, the second video of my message on sound frequencies and vibration. There was a lot of information that I had to leave out of the first section, or the first video rather, because I had to keep that to about a half hour. This one may go longer, we'll see what happens. This contains a lot more intellectually dense information, not so much spiritual information, but natural type information, and like I said, intellectually dense. Some of it is. I hope you'll enjoy this. I'm going to talk about Dr. Royal Rife, Nikola Tesla. I'm going to talk about 528 Hertz, and I'm going to talk about some other things too. So let's get started. This particular article is taken from a website called energyfanatics.com. Most of us believe the world we live in is made of solid materials and that atoms are the building blocks of matter. When we look at the surface of reality, the concept that matter is solid is true to a certain point. However, when we dig deeper and look through the surface of reality, matter starts to vanish, and all there is left is energy. In other words, energy is the core building block of matter. Now, I do believe that energy is vibrating frequencies. I completely believe that. Because in Genesis chapter 1, God spoke and it was so. God said and it was so. So the foundation for what we see and of what's been created is what God spoke, and that came from His voice creating, and that is all about sound, frequency, and vibration. Okay? So energy has a unique quality that allows it to express itself into anything, which is why it is the core building block of matter. Again, frequencies, sound, vibration is all involved in this. One of the main reasons energy expresses itself through the use of vibration, oscillation, and frequency. The combination of these three things creates energy patterns, which are basically the codes of reality. These energy codes are then processed by our mind and consciousness, allowing us to see and sense reality in a solid state. If our mind and consciousness didn't process these energy codes, we would see reality as flashes of light patterns instead of solid materials. I think that's very, very interesting. Now we're going to talk about Dr. Royal Rife. All diseases have vibration and they are sensitive to certain frequencies. Dr. Royal Rife discovered this, I believe, in the 1930s, possibly at the end of the 1920s. Not positively sure, but you can look that up online. You can find that information. With the right frequency, scientists can destroy a disease-causing microorganism in the body without harming healthy tissues and cells. A brilliant scientist who was able to use the healing power of vibration and frequency to destroy microorganisms was Dr. Royal R. Rife, Dr. Royal Raymond Rife. In the early 1930s, Dr. Rife did some experiments that successfully killed harmful microorganisms using only frequency and high-intensity light pulses. The vibrational energy healing device that he used was called the Rife machine. Some researchers believe that his Rife machine was able to cure cancer. Well, it's a known fact, it's documented, that Dr. Royal Rife, with the use of frequencies and light therapy, had 16 out of 16 cancer patients completely, totally healed. with the use of frequencies and light pulses. No medicine involved. I'll leave that one right there. Another person who did a great job of showing the relationship between disease and frequency is Bruce Tainio, Tainio. Bruce was a microbiologist who did a lot of great research on how vibration and frequency affect microorganisms. He found that a healthy human body generates a frequency range of 62 to 78 megahertz. That's million hertz. He also noticed that if the frequency of the body drops below 62 megahertz, the body becomes susceptible to disease. In the last decade, now this could be 2 decades or 3 decades ago, depending on when this article was written, which at the moment I'm not sure. Vibration therapy and vibrational energy healing are being taken more seriously, which is why new studies are being done to see how vibration could be used to heal health conditions and disease. Recently, researchers at the University of Illinois at Chicago discovered that vibration therapy can hasten the wound healing process, especially the wounds of people with diabetes. As mentioned at Medical Express, xpress.com, wounds exposed to vibration formed more granulation tissue, a type of tissue important early in the wound healing process. Vibration helped tissue to form new blood vessels, a process called angiogenesis, and also led to increased expression of pro-healing growth factors and signaling molecules called chemokines, Weinhammer-House said. Certain vibrational energy healing techniques, such as vibration therapy, have been known to accelerate bone generation. Some successful bone generation studies were done by Stony Brook University in New York. The researchers at this university used vibration with low-intensity signals to accelerate the healing process of damaged bones. Besides healing health condition and disease, vibrational energy healing devices can help regenerate damaged tissue and lost limbs. If built and used correctly, these frequency healing devices can be beneficial to people with neurodegenerative disease, osteoporosis, diabetes, cancer, chronic disease, and lost body parts. Very, very interesting. Again, this was taken from energyfanatics.com. Now, what I have to share next was taken from an article called TRP, Resonant Frequencies in the Human Brain by Ron Termel, Termel. So, one of the great revelations of 20th century science is that all existence can be broken down into simple wave functions. Every photon, energy emission, and elementary particle rings with its own unique wave signature. Sound, to make it easier to understand. When we see a color, we are actually seeing a distinct frequency of visible light. When we hear a sound, our eardrums are actually being vibrated by subtle waves in the air molecules around us. Even the neurochemical processes of human consciousness, our very thoughts, ring with their own distinct wave patterns. Isn't that interesting? That is really cool. By studying the way that waves interact with other waves, researchers have found that even low-powered oscillations can have enormous effects on standing waves, physical structures, and even the human brain. The principle which describes this particular wavelength interaction is known as resonance. Resonance, remember that word. When you resonate with something, you are emitting a wave signature which is in sync with it. By applying a constant resonant frequency, to a standing wave, you can intensify, reinforce, and prolong the standing frequency of that wave. Remember, I said at the beginning of the video that this was going to be intellectually dense. So take what you can, if you can't understand it all, don't worry about it. You can go back and listen again and maybe get a little bit more or a lot more. But this is a part of what you learn when you study sound, frequencies, and vibration. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a very interesting man that probably many of you have heard about, Nikola Tesla. He was an amazing inventor way ahead of his time, and he really understood how to use sound, frequency, and vibration, and you'll be able to tell that very well after I finish reading this article. So here we go. Tesla first realized the massive potential of resonant waves in 1898. 1898. Wow. That's 122 years ago. That's amazing. So, in 1898, he performed a simple experiment with an electromechanical oscillator, the size of an alarm clock. He attached the device to an iron pillar that ran down through the center of his lab into the foundation of his building. His plan was to let it simply tap away until he could produce a significant vibration in the pillar. So an electromagnetical oscillator releases sound, vibration, obviously. Just wanted to clear that up. However, getting back to the story, Tesla was unaware that the vibrations from the oscillator were being conducted through the iron pillar down into the substructure of the city. Now get this. Just as earthquakes are normally the strongest at a short distance from their epicenter, nearby buildings shook and windows shattered while Tesla's lab remained unaffected. Without rapid police intervention, Tesla may have left the oscillator run all night as buildings crumbled around him. Now this oscillator is just emitting, probably not a really strong signal, but it was repetitive. And it was running down a metal girder, a pipe, down into the substructure of the city. And it's continuing to send these vibrations, continually sending them. And that's what happened. He could have caused a major disaster just by a little oscillator sending vibrations down through a pipe into the substructure of a city. A little oscillator the size of an alarm clock. Isn't that fascinating? Okay, now hear more about Tesla. In a later experiment, using the same principle, Tesla clamped an oscillator to one of the exposed ground floor beams of a half-built 10-story steel building. As Tesla told reporters later that day, "In a few minutes, I could feel the beam trembling. Gradually, the trembling increased in intensity and extended throughout the whole great mass of steel." This is a 10-story building that's not completed. Finally, the structure began to creak and weave, and the steel workers came to the ground, panic-stricken, believing that there'd been an earthquake. Rumors spread that the building was about to fall, and the police reserves were called out. Before anything serious happened, I took off the vibrator, put it in my pocket, and went away. That's really a fascinating and just an amazing story to me. But if I had kept on 10 minutes more, I could have laid that building flat in the street. Now listen to this. And with the same vibrator, the size of an alarm clock, I could drop the Brooklyn Bridge in less than an hour. You find the resonant frequency of something, the frequency at which it vibrates, and you shoot that frequency into it, and it comes apart, or causes it to collapse, or causes something like that. That's just pretty amazing. Tesla says, the principle cannot fail. He understood that a steady, tiny wave of tiny waves. He understood that a steady frequency of tiny waves would eventually create enormous ripples if they were timed just right. What Tesla demonstrated was a principle of resonance known as entrainment, the ability of a frequency to cause a less powerful frequency to fall into rhythm simply by placing the two frequency emitters in close proximity. In other words, if you take an electrical oscillator with a power rating of 10 watts that is oscillating at a frequency of 1,000 cycles per second, and place it next to an oscillator with a power rating of 1,000 watts vibrating at a frequency of 5,000 cycles per second, eventually the slower oscillator will be entrained, it will become synchronized, entrained to vibrate at 5,000 cycles per second because of the more powerful electromagnetic field created by the 1,000 watt oscillator. It's called entrainment. Okay, I think that's all we're going to share about Nikola Tesla, and I hope that you enjoyed that. Now I'm going to share some, like I said, this is probably the most intellectually dense information I'll share, and it is quite dense, but I'm going to read it anyway. When we expose ourselves to specific tones, we are affecting every molecule in our bodies. We know now that the human body is comprised of vibrating energy, frequencies, sound, vibration, and that our health or disease can be traced to how the cells in our body are vibrating and communicating with each other. In Molecules of Emotion, Dr. Candace Pert, P-E-R-T, writes, basically, receptors function as scanners, sensing molecules on a cellular level. They cluster in cellular membranes, waiting for the right ligand, much smaller molecules than receptors, to come dancing along, diffusing, through the fluid surrounding each cell, and mount them, binding with them and tickling them to turn them on and get them motivated to vibrate a message into the cell. Binding of the ligand to the receptor is likened to two voices striking the same note and producing a vibration that rings a doorbell to open the doorway to the cell. Dr. Candace Pert further goes on to tell us this: we have 70 different receptors on the molecules, and when vibration and frequency reaches that far, they begin to vibrate. Moreover, she observed, as they begin to vibrate, they sort of touch each other and tickle each other, and they play and mount each other. It's this whole energetic dance ritual at the cellular level that opens the chromosomes and exposes the DNA to the frequencies. Isn't that just like really far out? It's, like I said, very dense. I don't have time to get into Dr. Emoto's studies on water. And in all honesty, I have not read any of his books. I have observed photos. Okay, Dr. Emoto proved that if you speak kind, loving words to water, and then you freeze the water, and you take a drop of it and look at it under a microscope. It forms beautiful pictures. The molecules form beautiful patterns, intricately beautiful. If you speak hateful, unkind, just really bad words to water, and then freeze it and take it and put it under a microscope, you'll find very ugly looking pictures, patterns made by the molecules. So that proves how words affect molecules of water. We're made of at least 70% water. So that's why it's very important for us to be very aware of what we say. And it behooves us to speak words of love, encouragement, and strength and hope, and words that are godly and helpful, rather than the opposite of all those things. Not only for the benefit of those we're speaking to, but for our own benefit, because our cells are listening. Our cells, our body is listening to what we say. Our body is listening. Okay, let's move on. Now I'm going to talk about nature's sounds and stress. This is a statement by Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dispenza. Dr. Dispenza tells us this. In clinical studies, we have proven that 2 hours of nature sounds a day significantly reduce stress hormones up to 800% and activates 500 to 600 DNA segments known to be responsible for healing and repairing the body. Isn't that just like God? To make nature sounds healing to the human body? I'm going to read this again because it's so dense with information. Dr. Joe Dispenza tells us this. In clinical studies, we have proven that 2 hours of nature sounds a day significantly reduce stress hormones up to 800% and activates 500 to 600 DNA segments known to be responsible for healing and repairing the body. Again, nature sounds are healing. Bird sounds, bird songs, the rustling of the wind through the leaves of the trees, the sound of brooks and waterfalls, and the sound of ocean waves. These are nature sounds that we can all think of, just very quickly. They contain healing. They contain healing. Now, a minister named David Herzog, who was a guest on the Sid Roth show, this was taken from July 30th, 2012. Okay, I have met David. I've played in some of his meetings here in Hawaii. He's a really great guy. God's used him mightily in many ways. And he has a dynamic ministry. He's written some very, very revelatory books. I encourage you to get them. So he was on the Sid Roth show, and he mentioned something that really caught my ear, so I typed it out. He said, sound is incredible. Sound waves are embedded in everything in creation from the time of Genesis. Exactly, because that's how God created, with sound. Even your bones and your body parts have sound. Absolutely. That's why you don't have to just say, God, please heal me. You can speak to the body part. And the sound waves inside the atoms, those sound waves called quarks, can hear and obey human voice commands, especially if you are a believer in the God of Israel and you command. And I might add, I'm going to add to this, you command in faith, with faith. We've seen body parts recreated by speaking to the sound waves inside the body parts to be healed. Amen. I like that. Now I'm going to read an article. Okay, this article has scientific documentation that I found online. The Analytical Chemical Testing Laboratory Incorporated has this document from October the 26th, 2010, a little more than 10 years ago, posted on the internet. Okay? I know it's all backwards, but this is just to prove that what I'm about to read to you has scientific documentation behind it. 528 hertz, how it cleaned polluted water in the Gulf of Mexico. In 2010, John Hutchinson, an electromagnetic energy expert from Vancouver, BC, Canada, helped purify poisoned water off the Gulf of Mexico following the BP oil spill. He and his research partner, Nancy Hutchinson, used the 528 hertz frequency and other solfeggio tones to reduce the oil and grease in polluted waters. The polluted area was treated with the frequencies for 4 hours the first day, and by the next morning the waters were cleared. They also did 4 more hours of radio frequency to complete the test. The frequency device was situated about 25 feet up the beach from the water. That's pretty close. They restored the water's vitality as manifested by the return of fish, dolphins, and even barnacles. Nancy said that the water had been murky brown, that the water that had been murky brown was a clear green. 2 dolphins came into 5 feet of water to visit. Lots of schools of fish and crabs were very active. Their results were certified by Dr. Robert Naiman, president of Analytical Chemical Testing Laboratory Incorporated of Mobile, Alabama. Dr. Naiman, an analytical chemist with almost 30 years in the field, tested the samples and confirmed the complete removal of oil and grease from the after-treatment sample source tested. Now this is 528 hertz. 528 hertz is a real popular frequency and has been for years, actually. As you can see, the amount of oil and grease before the frequency treatment was 7 parts per million, while the samples that had undergone the frequency exposure measured less than 1 part per million, so it decreased by 6 parts per million. John's method of using sound and radio frequencies nearly eliminates the oil and toxins completely and has no known dangerous side effects. John and Nancy can clear a radius of about a mile in one 24-hour session. That's phenomenal. Analytical Chemical Testing Laboratory Incorporated stated, while the technology is not completely understood by the undersigned, it is clear that the process may have extreme value, and it should be given a chance to be presented and tested on a large-scale basis. Now I have some other information to share with you about 528 hertz. 528 hertz music specifically. Music that contains the 528 hertz frequency. When you tune your musical instrument to 444 hertz instead of 440, 444 hertz. Treble C on the piano, which is the C above middle C, is 528.1 hertz. So the 444 hertz tuning contains the 528 hertz frequency. Okay, if you didn't completely understand that, don't worry about it. It's okay. It's all right. Just understand that 444 hertz tuning and 528 hertz frequency are significant. Now, I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this paragraph, and then we're going to wind up for today. This study examined the stress-reducing effect on the endocrine system and the autonomic nervous system of music with a frequency of 528 Hertz, which has recently attracted attention as a healing type of music. 9 healthy participants, 1 man and 8 women, aged 26 to 37 years, listened to 528 Hertz and standard 440 Hertz music on separate days. We measured salivary biomarkers of stress, cortisol, chromogranin A, and oxytocin, before and after exposure to music, and continuously recorded the activity of the autonomic nervous system. The Profile of Mood State, second edition, was also administered as a subjective indicator of stress. In the 528 Hertz condition, mean levels of cortisol significantly decreased. Chromogranin A tended to decrease, and oxytocin significantly increased after music exposure. However, no significant change was observed in any salivary biomarkers in the 440 Hertz condition. The ratio of low-frequency to high-frequency autonomic nervous system activity significantly decreased after exposure to both types of music, and the coefficient of variation of R to R intervals also significantly decreased, but only after exposure to 528 Hertz music. The next part of this paragraph is the most powerful one to me, so I highlighted it. Tension, anxiety, and total mood disturbance scores were significantly reduced after exposure to 528 Hertz music, while there was no significant difference following 440 Hertz music. These results suggest that the influence of music on the autonomic nervous system and endocrine system varies depending on the frequency of the music. And furthermore, that 528 Hertz music has an especially strong stress-reducing effect even following only 5 minutes of exposure. Wow. Now, I just want to share with you that I have recorded 3 albums at 444 Hertz. Serenity 444, Flowing 444, and Piano Embrace 444. I have recorded 2 albums containing what are called the solfeggio frequencies, and each one of those albums has several tracks recorded with the 528 Hertz frequency embedded into it and the music tuned to it. Those are called solfeggio frequencies, and the other album is called Solfeggio Frequencies 2 Crystal Blue Renaissance. And I want to encourage you to go to bandcamp.com. You can look in the text underneath this video, and you can find the website address for that. You can also wait until the end of the video, and that website address will be included in the credits at the end. The music that you've been listening to while watching this video is taken from the Frequencies of the Heart album, and I hope that you've greatly enjoyed it. I want to thank you for joining me. I encourage you to watch the first video and watch this one again. Get more information every time you watch it. I know sometimes we learn in layers, right? And I also hope that you have a great day, a great week, and aloha from Oahu, Hawaii.